It's very nice. People share different ideas. I'm here today with my colleague, Harry Halpin. He's a professor of mathematics and cryptography and used to work for the W3C. We're also working together in our organization that we'll be talking about today. Before I start the presentation, he's going to give a few words as well to the audience.
Yeah, so Amir is perhaps most interesting, I think, not because of Bitcoin. So it is true that Bitcoin and the blockchain technologies have been massively successful. However, the larger free software movement, the larger movement to create crypto.
But you
different way of trading. You're not going to
is worse than, and if you're an activist in Egypt, your experience in 2019 is worse than your experience in 2009. So there's this, so that this relates to the crypto community. I think that in some ways, when we get into a new thing and we're like, yes, like we're fighting against the status quo. One of the things that's so difficult, and one of the things we learned from social movement creation is that the ideas that are the most powerful and revolutionary are not seen, and it's very hard to see them. So like when we came up with the idea for Occupy Wall Street, and when I told people the idea for Occupy Wall Street before it started, no one believed me. No one told me it was a organized for the very first day of the movement. But I've also been kind of lurking.
It's my honor to serving solutions and tools. They're all open sourced. And yeah, before starting my presentation today, I want to thank they have an insecure system in there, like in such a company that's storing the sensitive data. Well, who knows that? And the next one is this year. So may know or may not know this, but a Twitter user called Victor Gives posted this tweet on March 2nd.
everyone. We're about to get started, so if you are coming to this session, you should come join us now. People are filtering in. Great. All right, hello. My name is Michael White, and this is Amir Taki, and we are doing a session on crypto for activism. I want to explain first the format that we're going to do. It's going to be a little bit more interactive than some of the sessions that you've had so far. So I'm going to give a 10-minute brief introduction to some ideas about activism in crypto. Then Amir and I are going to have a on-stage discussion for about 20 minutes. And then we're going to have questions from the audience. And so while we're talking, think of your question and then line up at this mic, and we'll just kind of go into a free-flowing discussion. I also have copies of my book for free. At the end of my talk, just go grab them over there. They're in a stack. There's about 20 copies, so first come, first serve. Okay. Are we ready? Great. Okay, so my name is Michael White. Briefly, I just want to tell you my kind of story to situate myself in my context. I am a lifelong activist. I started doing activism when I was 13 years old. And I did lots of things. I went to Palestine, did direct action nonviolence. I basically tried to every year I did a new kind of campaign. Eventually, I worked my way into a magazine called Adbusters. And in 2011, during the kind of peak of the I just want to tell you my kind of story to situate myself in my context. All right, hello, my name is Michael White, and this is Amir Taki, and we are doing a session on crypto for activism. I want to explain first the format that we're going to do. It's going to be a little bit more interactive than some of the sessions that you've had so far. So I'm going to give a 10-minute brief introduction to some ideas about activism in crypto. Then Amir and I are going to have a on-stage discussion for about 20 minutes. And then we're going to have questions from the audience. And so while we're talking, think of your question and then line up at this mic, and we'll just kind of go into a free-flowing discussion. I also have copies of my book for free. At the end of my talk, just go grab them over there. They're in a stack. There's about 20 copies, so first come, first serve. Okay. Are we ready? Great. Okay, so my name is Michael White. Briefly, I just want to tell you my kind of story to situate myself in my context. I am a lifelong activist. I started doing activism when I was 13 years old. And I did lots of things. I went to Palestine, did direct action nonviolence. I basically tried to every year I did a new kind of campaign. Eventually, I worked my way into a magazine called Adbusters. And in 2011, during the kind of peak of the Arab Spring, we put out a call for something called Occupy Wall Street. And very quickly, the call was picked up by activists in New York City who started to self-organize, and they went ahead and created, basically, the movement. So I'm one of two people who came up with the original idea for Occupy Wall Street. We picked the name, the date, and that kind of stuff. And then there's about 200 people in New York City who actually organized for the very first day of the movement. But I've also been kind of lurking in the crypto scene for a long time because Occupy, around the time that we were coming with the idea for Occupy Wall Street, Bitcoin was very new. I was paying attention to Bitcoin. I was an early kind of adopter of Bitcoin. I got my first 5 Bitcoin for free from the Bitcoin faucet. And so I've been in the scene for a while. I remember when Counterparty versus Ethereum, I remember the first Ethereum announcement and that kind of stuff. And so it was just kind of recently they started to come out of the crypto closet, as it were, and to talk about cryptocurrencies and activism. And recently, when I was invited to give this talk, I actually went ahead and learned Solidity. So I have a basic understanding of Solidity to give more depth to this conversation. All right, so let's get into it. So one of the things that I think is very tantalizing question, the concentration of decision-making within the maker stability fee or something like that. This is an example of how just because you enact a DAO doesn't mean you're necessarily creating a more democratic or equal distribution of wealth. I mean, think about how unfair it is. Like I just told you, I got 5 Bitcoin for free in the early days. That's in itself, that is extremely unfair. It's unfair to have a system where people got Ethereum for very, very, very little bit of money and now can cash out even at $190. They're making massive profits.
Yeah, well, not only that, there's this a social credit, sesame credit system in China now, where if you talk with the wrong person, because they're monitoring everybody's chats on WeChat, if you're late for an appointment, you get a lower social score, meaning you cannot rent an apartment, you cannot get a train ticket.
You know, there's entire parts of China now where you cannot go 2 blocks without having your iris scanned. Entire systems for monitoring and managing human beings as tools, as human resources. I see a lot of that rhetoric inside of blockchain going, oh, me and my friend, in the future we will have a smart contract between each other. These are really scary fundamental systems of control. I actually saw a blockchain project recently which was about having people's credit scores and debt ratings on a blockchain, so the credit card companies, it's like your data about your score with money would become like permanent in a permanent global database. Like, even if it's decentralized, it doesn't mean that people are free or there's no power, you know. So you talked actually about number one, new economic models, and you said, yeah, you mentioned a few things, but the interesting point I think is that we should start to look at the technology, because you said, oh, poor people, a rich person can pretend to be a poor person. We should start to think that these models that we create don't necessarily can be quite oppressive, and instead we need to be thinking about the ideas that are driving us, and how we make tools for individuals that empower human beings to shape the world around them. What type of human beings we're empowering, rather than a perfect system that allocate a little space of freedom and equal resources to a bunch of people, because I think that other view is a bit totalitarian.
Well, I think there's 2 ideas here. So one is this question of like a lot of people within the activist community kind of push back at me for even talking about crypto because they see it as an inherently oppressive technology. But I think instead, like if you look at the history of technology, obviously it always has like a dark side. Like Paul Virilio talks about, like there's always an accident associated with technology. And I think that personally, I think that cryptocurrencies are perhaps one of the most evil technologies created, and yet at the same time, they hold this tremendous possibility, this tremendous revolutionary possibility. So at the same time as you have the ability to we can live in, I think it's easy for us to imagine a world very soon where like everything about ourselves is encoded into some sort of immutable blockchain that some government out there is like reading, and it involves all of our, this whole level. Basically, blockchain is a tremendous tool of surveillance, yes. But at the same time, I think that activists still have this window of opportunity. Like it's still so new. I mean, it's amazing to think that Ethereum's like 5 or 6 years old. It's still so new that there is a possibility that we could turn things. But I think like at the same time, there's a question about how much liberatory possibility there is because of the very nature of the system. So it's like, I don't know. I don't want to just like say that it's impossible, but I also think that it's important to kind of have like a skeptical view. But yeah, it's tricky.
Yeah, well, whenever I go to any of these speeches where people are talking about synthetic derivatives so people can get easier mortgages, I'm like continually thinking, like, why aren't we leveraging that to speculate on government bonds and use them to dump them in mass? Like, we literally have amongst us like the capability and power to crash national economies. A lot of the thinking is on really low level. Like, you have the old rich who they raise their kids from generations in particular ceremonies and rituals which are like honing their dynasties to maintain power, and you have this nouveau crypto rich who they just want to buy yachts and Lambos. You know, if we want to be a power, like we want to actually be a political power, like step it up to a real level, we have to really think big. And the main issue I'm experiencing now is there are all these crypto companies, and they're just focused on their brands, their little niche that they're carving out, and they're all trying to one-up each other. And it's kind of the same thing that I experienced in Occupy. I went to Occupy in the beginning. It was amazing. Loads of young people from all of over the country, they intuitively feel something is wrong, and they came there because they wanted to change something. And they arrived there, and what did Occupy offer them? Said, okay, let's have a discussion what we're actually doing. And, you know, that momentum over time kind of dissipated. Some of them got normal jobs. Now some of them are into drugs. I don't know. But that energy kind of just dissipated.
Yeah. Well, I think there's two things here. So one is that, and I think this is in terms of applicable to the crypto community, is one is that the experience of social protest teaches us that we mustn't be naive about the power of the status quo. The power of the status quo is so tremendous that, like, for example, look at the fallout of the Arab Spring. Like, who would have thought that overthrowing Mubarak would result in a government even more regressive than Mubarak? The Sisi government is worse than, and if you're an activist in Egypt, your experience in 2019 is worse than your experience in 2009. So there's this, so that relates to the crypto community. I think that in some ways, when we get into a new thing and we're like, yes, like we're fighting against the status quo, we become very naive about the possibility of actually damaging that status quo. And the status quo is amazing at co-optation. So very soon, you find that you're all of a sudden being absorbed. And this is happening in the crypto community through succumbing to the idea that we need to submit to regulation. I see that very much, like that we should already be submitting to regulation. And I get that because